Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hardcore Finance Show. How are you, Alex?
I'm good. It's been a little bit since we talked, huh?
That is true. Lots going on in the world, so we thought of dedicating today's episode into just like covering the most recent financial events around crypto, around the markets in general. So what do you think about the state of the world today?
I think we should talk about Evergrande.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should talk about... It was a fascinating podcast I heard from Willie Wu and Peter McCormick today. So I want to talk to you about that. The two ultimate Bitcoin maxis admitting that altcoins aren't a scam, which is Willie Wu was always admitting it, but Peter McCormick, that's going to be an interesting one. And well, we have yet another China ban, so we should definitely talk about that.
Yet another China ban, and yet another. It's interesting actually. Today the markets dropped a lot. Rates are increasing a little bit.
Yeah,
we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, the bond yield. Perfect. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with China, so we can talk about Evergrande and the Bitcoin ban. And my question to you is: I remember 7 other China bans of Bitcoin, and every time is like, oh, the previous ones weren't like real, but this one is, And I think the biggest one was the mining ban because it had actual implications on like where miners are located. But then after the mining ban, now this. What do you think of that?
We're gonna cut here. You talk like when you move. Look at me.
Okay.
It echoes when you talk to the mic. It's good. Okay. Oh, the Chinese bans. Yeah. So the mining ban is interesting. Let's talk about a little bit about the mining ban. We talked before. About it, and we said, look, we actually talked about this on the show that there was an electricity demand where the miners were, and basically the miners are loading the grid as they could and should, but China all up, we suspected, had an electricity problem. We talked about this in one of our previous episodes, and actually now they do. They're shutting down. There's a whole electricity shortage in China. And they're shutting down various parts of the economy and talking about how this can cascade to slow growth. So the whole mining ban, as more and more evidence comes out, wasn't about crypto per se, because they're letting the many people manufacture mining machines. That's okay. It's like, yeah, we hate crypto, we hate Bitcoin, but you keep on manufacturing and selling mining machines abroad. They did it because of electricity, because they knew central planning. We can talk about central planning and how Bitcoin and crypto ultimately decentralize everything. Central planning doesn't work. It does not work. And so, creates yes men or women that just say yes to the machine. And now they have an electricity problem, a countrywide electricity problem. So it was, crypto was just a byproduct of all this.
Yeah, and it's more than central planning. It's like subsidies don't work, right? Like they were subsidizing electricity, and you see it all the time where I don't remember, there was something about the civil war in Syria and Lebanon and how like one thing was subsidized, so they smuggled it across the border. You like buy the subsidized product and sell it at market rate. And so that's effectively what Bitcoin was. You buy subsidized electricity, but you create Bitcoin from it at market rates. And I think that's what the government didn't like, which is fine. If you subsidize your electricity, no problem. There's very interesting talks out of Miami now. The mayor was saying, look, we have a nuclear power plant. Why not use it for Bitcoin mining? So I think I'm actually very optimistic about Bitcoin being a force for good, not just in terms of green energy, but also in terms of many times people will have a nuclear power plant and they'll say, like we can satisfy the demand with like other sources of energy. But then if you have a way to monetize the nuclear power, then it changes the equation completely. And so I really hope that we'll just move to a reality of market rate electricity instead of subsidized electricity, and that's what will power the Bitcoin network. So I'm less worried about that. But what do you think about, you remember back then people said, oh, this is the biggest ban ever, and now there's another ban on like trading? It's not even trading. You can hold, but you can't transact in it. Which, first of all, I don't understand, because if I speak 12 words to you, is that a transaction or not? If I have 2 wallets, one of them has 0 Bitcoin, the other one has 1 Bitcoin. I transfer 0.1 from one of my wallets to another one of my wallets. That's not a transaction. But then if I speak 12 words to you, giving you access to my second wallet, is that a transaction? Did I break the law? Like, it's so unclear.
Yeah, well, you actually showed me a great meme. It was different cultures, and it was like, Germany, problem, solution. U.S., problem, a lot of talk, solution. China, problem, you just cancel the problem. This is, it's kind of true. I mean, it was funny, but it's kind of true. China doesn't like it. Here's what I think is what's happening. I don't think the mining ban, we talked about this a lot, actually was a good thing for Bitcoin globally. And I actually
think it's a good thing, or you don't?
The mining ban? Oh, yeah. Absolutely great.
No, because you said I don't think the mining ban is.
Oh, sorry. I do think the mining ban is a good thing, and we're on record from before saying it's a good thing. Actually, let me back up. There's a couple of things here. There are many people who say anything that happens to Bitcoin is a good thing to Bitcoin, for Bitcoin. And it's kind of true. And then there's a whole other camp that says, well, there's all these bans, and it's going to put downward pressure on price. How could all these Bitcoin bulls are delusional? They say it's good. I'll tell you how this China ban is actually good. One, the old China ban was good because it decentralized. It moved miners away from China all over the world into Western countries, countries that are pro-capitalism. So therefore, it makes Bitcoin more resilient. Check. That's good. Two, it's also good because now we know, in retrospect, that it was never about Bitcoin per se. It was about electricity usage. Okay. Three, we know that China, this time it is a little bit different in that it's a coordinated cross-government entity edict, put on a lot of the Bitcoiners out there. And they're basically saying, we're really going to cut down on trading, and we have tools to monitor the space, which they could very well have. I mean, since 2017, 3 or 4 years have come and gone. Technology evolves. But here's the thing. So let me get to a couple points. I would love to hear your opinion as well. Mm-hmm. It shows a government in China right now that's struggling under the stress of its own system. Lack of electricity, lack of growth, real Chinese-style growth coming out of COVID, okay? A very risky regulatory and financial environment when you have real estate. People are building ghost cities. Why is Evergrande? We should get into it. Why are they going down? Because they've been building ghost cities, and the rents can't sustain the leverage these guys created.
Hey, I say ghosts have to live somewhere.
Ghosts have to live somewhere. Yeah, we're not anti-ghosts. For the record, we love ghosts. We love ghosts. Yeah, we need them to live somewhere. That's good. That's good. So they build all these cities. No one lives there. They're not getting paid rents. They're leveraging, and this is not just Evergrande, many Chinese real estate companies, and there's exposure to the banks. This is the central planning of creating a fake economy. So they're struggling to sustain growth. Plus, Xi Jinping is now coming out very clearly against the wealthy, against capitalism as we've known it, Chinese capitalism as we've known it for the last couple of decades. There was I actually heard this on Real Vision today. They do these daily, these quick daily shows. They were talking about Louis Vuitton and how, hey, a great way to basically hedge yourself against China, it's a great idea, is to look at Louis Vuitton and actually short Louis Vuitton, because if the Chinese economy is slowing down, the millionaires want to get the money out. I can't go on and spend expensive watches on expensive watches, expensive clothes, expensive bags, because that holds value, and they actually kind of like it. So they're going to short the Louis Vuitton group as a proxy. So I think it's a good thing also because Bitcoin needed to have a governmental fight. We thought it was going to be a lot later, so we were wrong there, and it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to admit it. It's coming a lot earlier. But it's going to survive this. There's too much institutional interest in the U.S. And when we're thinking about geopolitics, the last reason why I think it's good is because in the U.S., there's all these fights, Democrats, Republicans, left versus right, and so on, crypto, pro-crypto, anti-crypto, but everyone's kind of anti-China. And we see how these guys are clamping down on human rights and so on, and now how they're clamping down on Bitcoin. It's a massive strategic advantage to basically take what China's giving us and capitalize on it. So I'm more bullish on the U.S. laws, which are actually ultimately the more important ones, because as the U.S., so goes the Western world. And once the Western world goes with all that GDP spend, I'm not even talking about the third world, because they're already going to Bitcoin because they need to protect themselves somehow. So I think it's ultimately bullish. It's going to be choppy. It's going to be choppy.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I completely agree about it being bullish. I have a couple of thoughts about what you said. Made me think that I have this thesis of like, whatever the governments do towards Bitcoin improves Bitcoin. But whatever Bitcoin does, it helps governments improve. And here's my thesis. So, you know how you had before the whole concept of borders, right? It's based on physical stuff. So, like, you have borders, you have a certain legislation within the border, and then you have tariffs, and you can basically prevent the flows of capital and goods and people into your borders. And that's your way to control legislation. Now, you had places where they said, look, we don't have tariffs. Like, I just heard a very interesting guy from New Zealand. He was like the prime minister of New Zealand, and he made them grow really fast. And the way he did it, he basically said, look, there's no subsidies for farmers, but also no tariffs on importing farm goods. And those two things were basically a planned farming economy in New Zealand, where like the government would tell farmers what to grow. And it would subsidize them. So like if your crop failed, you got money from the government, but also you didn't have competition from the same crops being imported. Once they opened it, it made their economy grow a lot. Now, what is Bitcoin for China? I don't think they can. First of all, I'm bullish China. I think they have very smart people. They have like a competitive advantage in the fact that, you know, that there's a segment of production that can be done best in China. The one thing that bothers their growth is the central planning. Because like you can't plan centrally for a billion people, right? Now, what does Bitcoin do? It says, look, okay, if I can't buy Bitcoin, I just go on vacation to Macau or to like Vietnam or something. I buy it there and I just come back and I have it, right? The whole point of a border doesn't work when I can just remember 12 words in my head. So that's one. Number two, if I have Bitcoin and I want to spend it, right? Let's say I can't spend it in China. I can still get it out of the country, spend it there on something else, like on some store of value. As long as we're talking about store of value, I believe that Bitcoin is store of value, right? And that's why I think that no matter what the government does to Bitcoin, it will survive, it will thrive, but also this is the only store of value that currently exists in China, because you see the stock market is not a very good store of value because of the whole central planning and the malinvestments, right? Real estate is not a good store of value, as we see with Evergrande. You have more apartments built than people in China. So what are you going to use for a store of value? Now, what happens when your people can have a store of value, right? Like many governments that hyperinflate the currency, they basically don't want people to have a store of value. They confiscate gold, they put capital controls. If your citizens can have a store of value, it basically means you cannot screw up your economy too much because there's an exit valve. And that eventually, I think, will be very good for the Chinese economy. What do you think of that thesis?
It's an interesting thesis. I'm probably a little bit less. I'm not as bullish as you. Not a little bit. I'm neutral to bearish in China.
Finally, we get to disagree on something.
Let's disagree on this. I just think that China has come a long way in being a very good manufacturer. So they take an idea and then they execute it very, very well and very cheap and very efficient, but not necessarily a lot of innovation compared to, let's say, the U.S. Not saying China has no innovation. Definitely there's innovation coming out of China. AI is big in China, for example, but not on the same level as a decentralized economy where you have a natural competition between winners and losers. And so now that Xi Jinping is closing it down even more, I think the culture will change to kind of be down the party line, work towards the common goals, whatever those are, and everything else is secondary. Couple that with, look, why is China also doing this? They're doing this because they're going to launch digital yuan. And with the digital yuan, with the government controls, you can literally say, hey, Shimon, you're a bad citizen. We're going to turn off your money and keep everyone else's on. And my money is good, but your money, you specifically and your family, double inflated. And we already know China has like the citizenship scores where, how good of a member you are of society. That affects your credit and ability to get things. They'll be able to ultimately control you with digital money. I think that's the quote unquote genius, which is this kind of evil genius in this case, of the system, where they're creating a system where they don't have to come down with an army and hold people down. They're going to hold people down with social contracts based on the social scores and with monetary contracts. And once you're there, it's very hard to get your money out. You can go to Macau and Vietnam, but the bank says, hey, I saw you've been researching crypto, you've been on VPN, which means you're probably doing something illegal. Your money you cannot take this digital yuan out in Macau or in Vietnam.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of trade between China and Vietnam. So it's not, I don't think they can have capital controls in Vietnam.
No, but not on an institutional level, on a personal level.
Oh, no, but
on a retail level,
how do they know? I think privacy is getting to a place where they cannot know what you have on a personal level. That's the whole point of Bitcoin. Because you can always say, look, I lost the private keys to this thing.
No, what I'm saying is you're a Chinese citizen and you're gonna hold your value in the digital yuan.
No, I can hold it in Bitcoin. That's what I'm saying.
Let's say you're holding in digital yuan, or not Bitcoin.
Let's say I have $1 million in digital yuan, right? I make a trip to Macau or to Vietnam or wherever.
And you want to buy Bitcoin. How are you going to do that?
Yeah, so do they allow me to transfer the digital yuan into Vietnamese dollar? No, they have to because there's a lot of flow of trade between the two countries.
No, they don't allow you because you've been researching.
That's what I'm saying. So it's a privacy thing, right? So I can route this through somewhere else. My whole point is like only in the traditional banking system is my identity linked to the crypto, right? As long as there's like someone who's willing to take my digital yuan.
Possible? No, listen. Is it possible? Of course.
No, but it's an important point. I think this is a key point. This is what people don't understand. They think of bars of gold. Yeah, they can block me from transferring a bar of gold between borders. But like, no matter what system you do, as long as I can use a VPN and I can just like transfer digital information between the two countries, and as long as there's a currency exchange rate between the two currencies, if those two things exist, your capital controls against Bitcoin are useless.
So for the record, I'm not saying that Bitcoin will be completely killed in China. People are scrambling. Well, actually, there's a great tweet. They were like, okay, well, does this mean they're going to make all the Chinese Bitcoin holders hodlers, essentially, because they won't be able to move it? They're just going to be able to hold it, which is actually more valuable for Bitcoin in the long run.
Also trade it. You can do whatever you want. It's a global market.
You can't necessarily trade it. They're going to put a lot of speed bumps. They're going to make it hard. They're going to make it very hard. They can't stop it. They for sure cannot stop it. I agree with you there. They're going to make it very hard. An average Joe Schmo is not going to go into deep DeFi.
I'll give you another example. We can even step away from the technical aspects of it. If Chinese people can invest in U.S. equities, which I'm sure they'll be able to do forever, because otherwise it's like leaving a lot of money on the table, and you have U.S. equities with bigger and bigger exposure to Bitcoin, and with an entangled exposure to Bitcoin, right? Like MicroStrategy, 100% exposure to Bitcoin, but Square, like, would you prevent Chinese companies from owning Square or PayPal? You know, it's like it's becoming tricky. That's my whole point. Is that all the capital controls are based on a border system that controls physical flows.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And because Bitcoin is not physical and it can kind of permeate everywhere, I think this is good. Now, this brings us also to the point of like why Bitcoin is a store of value and why all the other things are, just like venture investments, right? All the other cryptos, you could think of them as venture investments. So it's like company, and whether they have a pre-mine or not is like, do you get in at the seed level or do you get in at the Series D? And then there's an appreciation from there. That part they can totally block, right? Because they can just say you cannot own these like other things because it's not like.
How is it different than Bitcoin? They're just as fungible, just as transferable.
Okay, I guess if you transfer it back to Bitcoin, it's that's true.
It just has a different risk profile.
Yeah, and so then it becomes really interesting because then, Chinese people can invest in essentially startups that are tokenized. That becomes really, really interesting. So I want us to talk about the use cases for non-Bitcoin tokens. And I think it's like very exciting for global innovation because it's the first time that, people from all over the world can like venture invest into a company and get the yield from that.
Well, so we have a couple topics. You want to touch upon yield curve. So which ones, where do you want to go?
I would say, look, the yield curve. Yeah, let's talk about the yield curve. What do you think is happening with the market?
We can talk about that and then we can go into, yield curve is coming up. What's the 10-year now? It's 1.5 something, 1.6?
I just saw today the market's crashed and the treasury yields went.
Yeah, it's like a 3-month high. People are seeing that inflation is transitory, and a lot of it has to do with not only what we're seeing in inflation, also with China. Again, we're going to come back to China. Why? Because if China's growth is slowing down, and their capping electricity, which they are, in order to have less production. For the Western countries, this signifies two things, especially after COVID and after Evergrande, which is we should touch upon, that the Chinese economy has some sort of fragility, which means that if you're Apple, for example, you got to get your supply chain off of China and create a second point of redundancy. That's not quickly done. But you have to do it soon, right? It's almost like a panic move of supply chains, and you got to do it before everyone else does it, right? So you can capture efficiencies wherever you go. If that happens, then you have to bring more supply chains in house, especially to the U.S. It costs more to make them, so you'll have even more inflationary pressure. And so you have worries of the Chinese economy slowing down. You have worries that you have to take supply chains out of China and bring them to the U.S. now impeding. You have worries that Evergrande could create a Lehman Brothers moment, which it won't, but it will definitely cause hardship within China, which basically there's a flight to safety. So, what's the flight to safety? People are starting to look at the U.S. and like, holy shit, now in the U.S., it's actually going to cost a lot more money to have the supply chains, and maybe this will spill over to the U.S. If this spills over to the U.S., what is the point of holding these useless bond instruments, right? So bonds sell off, the yields go up, growth stocks, which we all believe in, get hammered. But before we're taking the last 2 days has been a bloodbath. It's all very interconnected.
So what do you think? I have thoughts on like how this will play out. What do you think will be the situation? Let's say a year from now.
A year from now,
2 years.
I think our thesis still stands, right? We always talk about how technology will be deflationary ultimately, and so I think we'll see wage increases will persist. That inflation will persist. Maybe some commodity, consumable goods, buying a TV, a table, and so on, will stay fairly low because we're going to have we do have good technology, better and better technology. I do think some things will get onshored. So chips and computers, I can see consumer electronics actually increasing in price. Auto vehicles and staying for 5 or so years, maybe a little bit longer, until we can get the supply chains here and optimized. I do think there's going to be an exodus coming out of China. Now, look, in the midterm, is that bad for some of these stocks? Sure. In the long term, no, because the more we move to the U.S., again, the better knowledge we're going to have in not only manufacturing, but AI. And so it will accelerate things down the line.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I completely agree with you in the sense that I think, yes, yields will go up, stocks will get hammered, but maybe the bad stocks will get hammered, the ones where, because why, I want to explain to our viewers, why do yields going up hurt stocks? Because like you take your cash flow and you discount it by the yield, right? Because your alternative use of the money is putting it in the bank and getting the yield, like buying treasuries and getting the yield. So when the yield goes up, the value, the present value of your investments goes down. However, the flip side of that is that when you start new projects, right, if the yield is higher, you will only invest in projects that guarantee a higher growth. Yeah. So I think it's actually healthy on the long term. Yes, I hope that people listen to us and didn't take too much leverage because, the stock market could go down by 30%. I mean, it's super, super, super bubbly right now. But I mean, I think that longer term, I still believe in it as so we've never said the stock market is bubbly. We said it was a little frothy but hot. But bubbly, I just mean I don't mean this is what I don't understand about some of the financial podcasts. They say we're in a bubble. It's like, okay, but what do you think will happen after the bubble pops? And I don't know if the bubble is
what's the short term, 5%. The term of the bubble.
I don't know about short term.
But that's what I'm saying. Bubbles, exactly. Bubbles are fairly short term. We always talk about you invest at the top of the .com bubble, you're still making out like a bandit today. It's all about link. Now, I don't think there's going to be a .com like bubble because of many things we talk about in other podcasts. We're going through a technological revolution now. This is the Kathy Wood thesis. We both firmly believe in that thesis. So I don't think we're that frothy, but there's definitely there's definitely speculation. Right, there's definitely speculation.
My thing is so I plan on getting 7% right from the stock market, real return, after inflation, after everything, 7%. I can buy next year on average 7% more stuff than I could buy this year with my portfolio. Will this still hold? Yes, I think there's enough companies in the US, and again, I'm only talking about the US. I wouldn't touch Europe. I don't know anything about China, so I wouldn't own Chinese stocks, but the US, you have enough companies that can give you, you give them money, they give you 7% more. Like, there's so many projects. You look at like the robotics stuff. You know, you and I were looking at videos of like robots doing crazy stuff that we couldn't imagine.
Shaking.
Dancing, yeah. Like, you look at all these like.
I don't believe in robotics. Until a robot can twerk, it doesn't work.
We will have to get demonetized.
Twerking, demonetized.
But no, seriously. So I'm bullish. Short term, who knows what will happen? And also, I don't know. I think it's healthy as the government now is talking about spending all these trillions of dollars. Thank God that there's 2 senators that are against it. But like, I think now is really, really good because like this week and next week they're supposed to vote on these crazy infrastructure bills. And if they say, okay, there's inflation, so yields go up, so the stock market crashes, probably better to not spend another $3 trillion on.
3.5, 3 trillion would be a compromise.
What's half a trillion between friends?
Yeah. I'll take it. Joe Biden. Hook up a half a trillion. I'll figure out what to do with the money. We should start wrapping, but what are your other thoughts? We didn't touch alts. Maybe we can touch alts next time. And how Peter McCormick all of a sudden went from this. I do want to touch upon this. I listened to a podcast with him and Willie Woo today, and Peter, my God, he went from a toxic hornet who was making fun of Raul Paul and any other person that, God forbid, says anything wrong, anything about Bitcoin. You came after Elon and said that toxicity was a feature. Yet 3 months later, I hear you saying, yeah, you know what, that was a mistake. The toxicity doesn't help anyone. And actually, did you praise Ethereum and some of the alts out there? You said they were good projects. It's like, yeah, no shit. It's like, yeah, no shit. Where have you been this whole time? Bitcoin maxis, the toxic ones. You can believe that Bitcoin is your only investment for yourself. That's absolutely fine. But believing Bitcoin is the one true God, literally, is just so counterproductive. And I think this breed is just dying out. It's going to be a multi-chain world. And if anything has taught us, like this year has taught us that it's definitely going to be a multi-chain world. These are not the 2017 ICOs. Mm-hmm. These are real projects with real followings, with real adoption, with real use cases, with real money, not speculative money tied in. And so saying that is just, you're either blatantly lying to yourself, right? Or you're sticking to some sort of dream. It's like the Peter Schiffs of the world, sticking to this gold bug dream. It's like ironically, the people who are saying, hey, I'm so enlightened, I found Bitcoin, you should just open up your mind, should open up their own minds and see what else is out there. The space is a beautiful space.
Yeah, and my main criticism of altcoins was like, can this thing be done on a centralized database? And recently I'm seeing more and more things that cannot be done on a centralized database because of various reasons. Like, for example, in GameFi, right, where you can like have the same object between games. I think it's very exciting. The one thing that cannot be done on a centralized database is money, right? So that's why I still think that Bitcoin will be the only money that exists. And like, that's why, for example, Ethereum, I mean, look, when they say we're like ultra hard money today, it's like, okay, but will you be ultra hard money tomorrow as well? Yeah. It's really shady. But on the other hand, if you say like, look, we're using this platform to develop like, I don't know, in-game tokens, I don't see a problem with that.
It's funny. Willie Woo was talking about, he's like, yeah, I hold Bitcoin. But when I go to DeFi, I use all Ethereum. Yeah. He doesn't use DeFi and Bitcoin. Yeah. Well, there isn't really DeFi and Bitcoin. But he doesn't go to Sovereign, for example. He uses Ethereum. He uses USDC. It's like, well, no shit. There's a real use case, right? And Ethereum provides a great platform to do that. So it's on one hand, it's refreshing that these guys are coming around. Willie Woo was always, I really respect him. But Peter McCormick would just come out there with this cocky attitude. A lot of times, that's true, Peter.
He's just like sometimes trying to be controversial,
Sure.
So, but yeah. So, guys, look into other projects. I personally don't own. I own a very, very tiny amount, less than like 0.5% of my total portfolio in one thing that's not Bitcoin. But like everything else, I don't own. Not because just because I haven't had time to research it. Some of the teams working on things are exciting. Just do your own research. For example, DeFi as a basket has underperformed both Bitcoin and Ethereum. In thinking of like how DeFi is built on top of Ethereum, it raises a really interesting question. Do you want to earn the picks and do you want to hold the picks and shovels, or do you want to bet on the gold? And we should probably talk about this at some point.
I would love to talk to you about this because I know we have to wrap, but when I was in Microsoft 2017, we created these slides, and people are talking about it now. In the traditional tech world, they'll leave us with this theme we should talk about next time. Value flows up. So you have the infrastructure layer, just like servers, and then you have let's say Windows or an OS, and then you have apps, and then on top of those apps you have you have Facebook, and on top within Facebook you have apps, and value flows up.
Yep.
In crypto, value flows down. Fundamentally, it's very different. The base layers accumulate most of the value. So I'm not surprised at all. I didn't notice that, but the DeFi as a basket underperforms. Yeah, because the value flows to the base layer protocol. Bitcoin, Ethereum, and these base layers.
No matter what happens to the DeFi things, people pay the fees.
Exactly.
Right? And that's what's beautiful. That's why I love working for an exchange, because it's almost like a call option on the space as a whole. Even if everything that's currently traded dies and is replaced by other things, the exchange still makes money. So that's like really good. In any case, we have to wrap. Thank you very much for being with us. Please like our videos, subscribe, leave us comments, tell us what interests you. And
until next week.
Until next week.